Hello and welcome to the second panel discussion of the One World International Queer Film Festival. This three-day film festival, which focuses on American LGBTQ films, is organized by Humsafar Trust and in collaboration with Kashish Mumbai International Queer Film Festival with support from US Consulate General Mumbai. Thank you all for joining today for the panel discussion. And we have some amazing panelists. And the topic of the panel is going to be what are the challenges in American, what are the challenges in portrayal of LGBTQ characters in American cinema and in Indian cinema? The panelists are Alexander Hunt, Vice Consulate General of United States, Mumbai. We have Lisa Donato, Director of Gossamer Folds, which has been the opening film for this festival. And we have O'Neill, Editor, Writer, Producer, and Director. And I'm moderating. I'm the filmmaker and Festival Director of Kashish Mumbai International Queer Film Festival. To give a brief bio of the panelists, the amazing panelists who are with us today, Alexander Hunt joined the Consul section at US Consulate Mumbai in January 2020 after completing his first assignment in Quito, Ecuador. He joined the Foreign Service in 2016 after spending 5 years overseas, mostly in India. In that country, he managed an international exchange program, consulted for UNESCO, worked as a marketing strategist for a think tank, and taught world languages to foreign diplomats serving in Delhi. He previously worked as a buyer and marketing director for a French art and antiques import company. Alexander holds a bachelor's in French and European studies from the universities of Arkansas and received a bachelor's in piano performance from conservatories in Russia and Italy. He earned his master's in international relationship and European studies from Central European University in Budapest, Hungary. He speaks French, Italian, Spanish, Russian, and Hindi. Wow, Alexander, that's quite a lot of languages you speak and a lot of accolades you have gathered together. Thank you for joining us today, Alexander. And next we have Lisa Donato. Lisa Donato is an award-winning filmmaker based in Austin and Los Angeles. Her feature directorial debut, Gossamer Folds, world premiered at the highly acclaimed Bentonville Film Festival in 2020 and has won over 20 awards during his worldwide film festival. So Gossamer Folds was the opening film of the One World International Queer Film Festival, which we are currently working on. She also co-wrote the feature film Signature Move, which world premiered at XXSW 2017 and screened at over 200 film festivals worldwide and can be found on Amazon Prime. So both Gossamer Folds and Signature Move also screened at Kashish Mumbai International Queer Film Festival in the previous editions. And also we have screened several short films, Sugar Hiccups, Spunkle, Foxy Trot. So thank you, Lisa, for making such amazing films. She also directed a television docu-series about drag culture in the US called Behind the Drag, which showcases the backstage lives of America's favorite drag queens. She has earned a passionate following by telling stories that don't shy away from the unique struggles of women, queer and straight, but focus on the power, resilience, and love they demonstrate in the face of them. Welcome, Lisa, and thank you for waking up so early in the morning with your cup of coffee and joining us for the panel.
Thank you.
And next we have O'Neill. O'Neill is a very dear friend, and of course, he's an Indian filmmaker, producer, screenwriter, and editor. Born as Anirban Dar in Samchi, Bhutan, O'Neill spent much of his childhood going to the cinema. Earlier, O'Neill studied comparative literature from Jadavpur University in 1989. He received a scholarship to study film editing at SFVTTC in Berlin. He later returned to India and worked as an editor, scriptwriter, art director, music album producer, and song music video director. He is best known for his film My Brother Nikhil, based on the life of Dominic D'Souza. It was one of the first mainstream Hindi films to deal with AIDS and same-sex relationships. He won the Indian National Film Awards for Best Film Hindi for the anthology I Am in 2011. I Am is considered as one of the first and largest crowd-funded and crowdsourced film through social media in India. The film dealt with single motherhood, child sexual abuse, displacement, and LGBTQI rights. His last release was Kuch Bige Alfas in 2018, which is currently streaming on Netflix. In 2018, he made a short documentary, Widows of Vrindavan, about unwanted mothers who try and seek solace in pursuit of divine love. It received Best Documentary Audience Choice Award at 9 Jagran Film Festival. In 2018, he received LICO Trailblazer Award. O'Neill has received a Diversity Award from Film Victoria, Australia, and La Trobe University at Indian Film Festival of Melbourne 2019. O'Neill received the Engendered Spirit of Independent Cinema Award 2020 at the Engendered Film Festival. Wow, we have such a brilliant set of panelists. Thank you all for joining in. It's a huge honor for me to be moderating this particular panel. So off with the first few questions. I'm going to just ask, first of all, Alexander, the first question. How has the representation of queer identities become more visible in the mainstream American cinema? You have grown up and lived in US. You have seen the film movement from the, I would say, I don't know how old you are, but I'm sure you're much younger. But I would say from the 1990s or something, you have seen the film movement. How has it changed over the last couple of decades?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I'm so happy to be here. I'm really glad that the U.S. Consulate is able to represent here and support the film festival in this way. That's a really interesting question. And I think what I have found, I mean, I grew up, yeah, as you said, in the 80s and 90s. And what I found was that at the beginning, as the sort of queer representation started creeping into cinema and television, the characters, like sort of the depth of the characters was lacking. It was often stereotypes, almost caricatures of gay people, of LGBTQ people in cinema. And it started to change, I think, in the early 2000s. There was a TV show called Will and Grace that came along, and this was also definitely a caricature, but it was sort of the first mainstream on-screen sort of story about LGBTQ people. And so that was a really big breakthrough. And then from there, it just became more and more, I guess, normalized in the United States. And now I think it's gotten to the point in the United States to where there are, I'd say most movies that you see have some LGBTQ character, and often it's not even the central issue anymore. It's become, in a lot of ways, I mean, there's still some room to go, I think, with trans characters, a lot of room for growth there. But for gay and lesbian characters, at least, I found that now it's gotten to the point where they're ubiquitous in cinema and TV, and often it's not even the central issue that's being highlighted. So I find that to be big progress.
And if you have to pick one amazing LGBTQ film out of all the films you have seen, American LGBTQ film, which would you pick and why?
There's two that were, Moonlight was one that was from a few years ago that was incredible. And because this also touched on African-American culture, and I thought that was really an interesting angle, because it was also, people of color being represented in cinema, as well as LGBTQ characters. So this was an amazing film. Another was Call Me by Your Name. That was a more recent one. Those two have been incredible recently.
Yeah, and of course, Brokeback Mountain is always everybody's all-time favorite, of course.
I mean, that one was really the breakthrough. And I think that was really the one that sort of allowed gay characters, LGBTQ characters, to really break through in US cinema. Yeah.
Yeah, and also, I've been seeing a lot of, in the OTT releases on Netflix and Amazon, I see a lot of non-binary characters and trans characters coming up, and they've been provided space, as you just mentioned. Tales of a City, inspired by Mr. and Maupin, has this wonderful trans character who just is integral part of the story, but his angst is not the main focus of the story. And that's the beauty of it. And also the series, The Politician, has a non-binary character just being part of the team. And these are, I would say, rapid strides being made in portrayals of LGBTQ cinema. And O'Neill, how has it been in India? You've been a pioneer, you've been making films all along. Has things changed over the last 20 years or 10 years or maybe 5 years?
I think very difficult question, because there are so many things that's constantly changing, and also so many things that has many layers. For example, when I think of my first film in 2005, and like in India, we have this film certification board, which tells you if your film can be shown, if it is only for adults, if it's with adults and children, and if it's viewed for all. So that was my first film at the time when homosexuality was criminalized by law in India. And at that time, I was expecting that, oh my God, this is going to be, after I made the film, I thought, will I be able to release it. And somehow when I went to the film certification board, though this was inspired by a real life story, they said that, listen, it's a beautiful film. All you have to do is put a card saying that everything in this film is based on fictitious events. And, and honestly, I was actually happy because anyone who would watch the film would know, and, that card would make a difference. And I wasn't told to edit anything. And when I went 5 years, when in 2011 I was making my film I wanted, the first film was family acceptance. The next was talking about the law and how very often the police, discriminated, terrorized gay people out here. And that film, after so many years, I thought would be easier. Whereas it took me, when I initially went to the certification board, I was told that, okay, the story, which was the LGBTQI rights, was 25 minutes. I was told to edit out 21 minutes of the film. Okay. And they had a problem that, oh, two men are looking at each other romantically. How can children watch it? That took me 6 months to just keep going through the tribunal, different things. So anyway, finally, the irony was I received the national award for that after having, of course, cut out about 6 minutes of the overall film, 2 minutes from this. 2017, when I made a film called Night, which had a lot of gay characters. When I went to the film certification board, I thought, okay, now it is 12 years after I've made my first film. This is going to be easier because I'm just showing lives without anything being issues. I was told that, oh, you're showing them as normal. And it was very humiliating to be standing there as an out and proud gay person and be told that you are showing them as normal. And it took me 1 year, various trips to the tribunal in Delhi to finally get the film out. By then, you have suffered so much financially that I could never recover because you've lost an entire year. So over the years, somewhere I felt that, is it that because we are claiming our space that there is more aggression in different forms? Right now in 221, when we are no longer criminalized by law, and I'm trying to make my film, which is 4 stories all celebrating LGBTQI love, one gay, lesbian, trans, and bisexual, in 4 different parts of India. I just see, whereas every OTT platform, everyone is talking about, okay, let's empower. No one is willing to come forward because I've been told on my face that, it's too gay. The audience is not yet ready. So very often now the challenge is that it's almost like, okay, now we accept you, but we want you to tell the stories that we want to hear. It's not me wanting to tell my story about my life. It's what pleases them. It's like, okay, doing me a favor that, okay, you exist and this much of you can come into my world. And it is extremely, every time I think that, okay, now it's going to be easier. And Sridhar, you are as much a part of it that I think both of us have been perhaps the only out and proud filmmakers from a long time, trying to make our films. It does not get easier, because empowering also means empowering people who have been voices. So that is absolutely absent, I think, be it for Sridhar or me, when it comes to the mainstream Indian film festivals. Our films travel the world, but here they never recognize or empower us. So I feel that somewhere the struggle takes a different form. It's changing, but it just, the challenges are new. It doesn't seem to stop.
Thank you for sharing the insights so honestly with your personal experiences, Onir. I totally agree. Things are not changing. And I would say things are not changing, especially for the queer filmmakers who are making queer films. I mean, a lot more non-queer people are making queer films, and they seem to be facilitated by a lot of people. But queer filmmakers making queer films are just not okay yet. Coming to Lisa, Lisa, like, I mean, how has it been basically making films about same-sex women relationship, female relationship? I mean, Alexander quoted a few films, Moonlight, Brokeback Mountain, Call Me by the Name, but they're all gay films. Is there a space for lesbian themed films or bisexual films in the larger LGBTQ American culture at all? I know you have been making independent films, but what about the mainstream? Can you just talk a bit about it and your personal experiences?
Yeah, yes, and thank you so much for having me and being such a huge supporter of my work throughout the years. It's meant a lot to me. So, yeah, I think, there are a lot of amazing independent filmmakers making a lot of nuanced LGBTQ plus films. For the last few years, I've been trying to sell a TV show in Hollywood. And so I've had a lot of experience, meeting with the gatekeepers to try to sell something to the mainstream. And I guess one of the biggest feedback is that, you go and you just kill the pitch. It's just like, they're like, this is one of the best pitches I've ever heard. And you're so excited. And then they say, but we already have our gay show, or we already have our lesbian show, right? And then you like look deeper and it's like, I think the gatekeepers are normally cis, straight, white people, and they just lump LGBTQ, in one bucket. And it's almost, like checking a checkbox. And so then you see the show that they end up releasing, and it's like nothing to do with the story that I want to tell. And so I think that it's definitely getting better, but there's just not room for like the nuances of our stories right now. I am not going to tell the same story as like, a white gay man. I'm going to tell a story that is my story, And so I think there's a lot of improvement to be made to tell like, more nuanced stories of what it means to be queer. And I think, especially in the mainstream, there's a study done, and of the 118 major motion films that got made, only, I think it was like 18% of those films had a queer character. And when you break that down even further, I think 50% or more were only on screen for 3 minutes. And so there's this idea of casual inclusion where people just throw a queer character up there and they think that that's okay, but the story or narrative doesn't, center around a queer person. So there's a lot of challenges. We have a lot, we are making progress, but there's a long ways to go.
Yeah, but like, well, following up one more question, like, I mean, you also like talked about, like, I mean, you've been making films about people of color, whether your Summer Fall, which features a transgender Black woman, or a signature movie which has a brown woman per se at the center. Yeah. So how challenging it is to portray these characters, like in terms of like people of color characters in films?
Yeah, I mean, I like to pride myself on like story structure, and so that's where my superpower is understanding just what story is. And so anytime I'm going to amplify a voice of a person of color or BIPOC, I'm going to partner with somebody that understands that perspective. So like signature move, Fawzia Mirza, she's one of my best friends and we were roommates for a long time. And yeah, I know you two are making a film together right now. She said to say hi. So, I definitely want to partner with somebody who understands that experience. I would never go out and make one without that partnership.
Okay. Yeah, I think we really need to.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, please. Yeah, please.
Because I feel like what Lisa was saying, that's like so wonderful. Because for me, one of the reasons of wanting to, work with Fawzia Mirza on We Are, she's like my co-scriptwriter, is also because I have a lesbian story, and there are various, and I feel that she brings in so much more also perspective to the queer gauge that I have, because we also are not this homogeneous, just like what Lisa was saying, that all of us dream, feel same. No, it's not. And I feel that having her with has been so wonderful to get in a distance, and at the same time, an insight which is from within. So It was wonderful to meet you, Lisa, to know that we are working with the same
Likewise.
people. Small
Yeah.
world, one world.
I know.
One word, totally. So
Yes.
moving on to Alexander, basically, I mean, what is your thoughts on whether films, LGBTQ films or any films, basically have been able to portray the realities of your growing up days, your coming out days, do you think are there films which are basically, or are they just basically whitewashing or pinkwashing a lot of things? Are they true to life? I mean, you growing up gay in US, do you think the films portray that? That's one question. Second question would be how important it is to be able to portray the political and religious aspects of our culture, in cinema. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, to your first question, I think that as a young boy growing up in the South, no less, which is historically more conservative than the rest of the United States, really any portrayal of LGBTQ characters was meaningful to me, and so I think that that had an impact. Even films that weren't necessarily about LGBTQ characters, but I mean, the film Billy Elliot, which is not about LGBTQ issues, but it's definitely about being yourself if you've seen it. And actually, I really attribute seeing this film to me coming out. I was 20 years old, I think, when it came out, and at the end of that film, it was like, I don't know, somehow the dam broke, and I was like, this is a film that had such an impact on me because it was just someone who was portraying someone who just was being himself. And so I think that the culmination of all of these films and the way characters have been portrayed from my childhood throughout has definitely sort of shaped my coming out and sort of coaxed me to come out. But I definitely want to speak to sort of what Lisa and Onir have been saying, that my experience is just one perspective within the LGBTQ community. I have a trans brother who just came out a couple of years ago, and that was a huge eye-opener for me. It was something that I didn't know anything about. I mean, just because I'm a gay man doesn't mean I know much about the trans community. And so I really had a lot of learning to do, and have really sort of come to see LGBTQ rights through a new perspective, and have started to see sort of as well in the media, in mainstream media, how different types of LGBTQ characters have been portrayed. So I think for me, that's been really interesting to see. Over time, yeah.
Yeah, the One World Film Festival, the One World International Queer Film Festival, has been able to showcase almost like 9 very, very diverse feature of films per se about gay men, trans women, and Black people, and also intersectionality between disability and queerness, which a lot of things we don't really talk about much at all. Also about migrant issues, also about displaced people. So I think One World Film Festival, if people have not yet watched it, they should go ahead right away. There's still a couple of hours to watch the films. So go to One World Film Festival and watch more films. Only coming to you, I know you already talked about the challenges of pitching to your projects, so which is, I mean, like, if I just pick up one film, I mean, out of the whole repertoire, which has been the most difficult film for you to convince people to produce and back your project, and how difficult was it to find actors, to play those parts? I mean, you've had this fantastic actors who played gay parts in your film. You have had Sanjay Suri, Purab Kohli, the one who played Rahul Bose, yeah, Arjun Mathur. So how difficult was it to convince them to play these parts here?
I think always convincing women, female actors is easier than male actors. Especially, it also depends on how, the actors I've always worked with are good actors who are looking for, roles that's meaty, that's challenging, and who are not threatened with their own identity. In terms of, when you're talking about how difficult which film, I feel that, like I was mentioning, I have ended up independently producing all my film and still struggling for my next one the minute they're LGBTQI. of this, already 6 films that I've produced and directed, the ones that didn't deal with the queer world, I always had a producer. So it's sometimes one is not conscious, and then you just put together things, though these were the films that were actually more talked about, somehow they never. And it's not just, it's every step. When you come to release the film, you don't find distributors. When you go to OTT platforms, for years, the film that has gone to 40 film festivals, won 2 national awards, for 6 years, no platform, no satellite channel even touched the film. So it is, there is invisible homophobia, invisible way, which is always stopping you. Directly, no one will say no. They will find different reasons to say no, which is actually stopping us from telling our stories, reaching a wider, I always feel that. And I feel now there are new challenges, that because of the OTT platforms, what has happened, the viewers that we had are also suddenly exposed to the entire world of cinema. So suddenly they expect us to be telling stories like what is happening in the West. But my world is different. That is only a small section of people who can afford and who are watching those films. Our reality, reality of the rest of the country, reality of the LGBT community of the rest of the country is very different. And when you talking for, because everyone thinks, oh, you're going to festivals, so you'll find an American or European distributor. There we are told that, oh, but we have done this 10 years ago. But doesn't matter. This is not about America. We are talking about, our society, our stories. It doesn't matter if you have done 10 years ago. And it's always that when one comes to talking about the language of cinema, world cinema, it's dictated by the West. We have to look and figure out, okay, they're doing there. So how do you now, because I want to go my film on Netflix, I have to figure out how I'm going to match those things that's coming here. I doubt if any European filmmaker or American filmmaker ever thought, okay, there's an audience in India. How do I reach out to an audience? But I have to try and, please the audience in the West. If I have to reach out to those festivals, which will make a difference to the marketing of my film. And at the same time, I have to also connect to my audience here. And I mean, again, Sridhar, I am telling you things that you experience all the time, but I feel that the challenges of being from, the Indian subcontinent, where we have it's just been 3 years that we have been decriminalized, so our struggles, our stories will obviously be very, very different, and very often that understanding is especially not there in the money bags. Again, the gatekeepers, like Lisa put it, distributors will say that no, but but like when I go to Castro and show my film there, I have a theater full of people crying, coming up and hugging and say that, oh my God, this is like our story, I remember especially people of color coming there and saying that, oh, the whole dynamics of family, everything is something that we can relate to. But the distributors won't feel that. So I feel that these challenges, new challenges are always coming. You cross a few, and then you suddenly see that, okay, there are a few more ahead.
I totally agree with you and empathize with you, because I've had similar challenges as a filmmaker, basically making my queer themed films, and your film wins so many awards at festivals around the world. It screens around the world, but there's no producers to back you in India with your next project, and that's happening all the time. Lisa, what do you think? One of the things I've been facing a lot of times is like there are gatekeepers in OTT channels or production companies who are themselves queer, but they act as roadblocks. They do not, that's something only can testify to that. We know a lot of queer people who are working in these companies, but they don't allow these stories to be told. They can come as blocks per se. Have you faced that? Is that system happening in US, or is it open, equal playing ground? What is the story on that?
No, I don't think there are enough queer people as gatekeepers and women. I mean, I've always had the philosophy that, just like I worked in corporate America for a long time before I became a filmmaker, and it was challenging to climb the ladder and get promotions. And, you need to have people that can empathize with that struggle in a certain way so they can make certain decisions to help change the playing field. So we absolutely need more queer people to be gatekeepers, to sign the checks. And secondly, I don't think a lot of people realize that, the LGBTQ community are like the people that are most likely to make a film successful. I mean, they are, less likely to have a family, kids, mostly because it's so expensive and not everybody has access to healthcare. And number two, it's been proven that queer people will go watch a movie in the theater at least 2 or more times. And then they will spread the word, like wildfire. So I think we got to, when I pitch, I always make that known that, this is going to be successful because the LGBTQ community is going to help make this successful. This is why you need at least 20% of your slate to be queer films or TV shows.
And also, like coming to the Pride Month per se, where we are right now, most of the companies basically pinkwash. They brand their logo rainbow. They come out. I mean, I've been attending panels every day, speaking at different panels by colleges, companies, corporate houses, channels. Everybody is just calling me to speak, and it gets exhausting. But basically, Alexander, what do you think of this whole? And your U.S. Consulate General Mumbai has been a constant supporter of LGBTQ community for years and decades. What does it take to basically and to come out in support when the law is not yet okay? About the Section 377 was there, and society is still not okay. So, what has been the challenges of U.S. Consulate General Mumbai supporting the LGBT community for so many decades?
Yeah, I mean, our work has really been focused on reducing the stigma in India because I think our perspective is that, it's important that we start there. I think if we can, use that as a building block, then there can be a shift in public perception. And I think that in the United States that we have sort of a nice case study, because in the United States, the public perception flipped from a large majority, not basically accepting LGBTQ people and not believing that, that this should be normalized, and it completely flipped to now it's the majority. I think it's something like 70% of the U.S. population, it supports LGBTQ issues in some way. So I think that in India, I think that the most important thing is to just change public perception. I think this is the number one sort of priority for the U.S. consulate. It's one of them, but that said, I mean, gay rights are human rights, and of course, there's a lot of progress to be made in India at the government level as well. But same in the United States. There's still a lot of work to be done, everywhere in the world. So, but yeah, I think that this has been really our biggest focus. And even within the State Department, we're still evolving, and we're still making still have a lot of progress to be made, and it's okay to take a look at that and recognize that there's still progress to be made. And but I think that it's impressive because President Biden on his first day in office signed a presidential proclamation or an executive order, basically reaffirming gay rights, LGBTQ rights, as a major priority for the U.S. government. And so, I mean, I think this is really symbolic, but I also think that it's going to push things along even further in the United States. And I think India, we just need a watershed moment in India as well to sort of push things forward, I think. You're on mute, Shrida.
I think there's a first year where I think the US Consulate General officers in Mumbai, Chennai, and many other places flew a rainbow flag
Yeah.
from its main flag post.
Yes.
Like that was historic, I would say, right?
Yeah, I actually was the one raising the flag. Yeah, so it was really amazing because it was the first time, I mean, it's 2021, and this was the first time in the history of the US consulate that the pride flag was raised. So that was really symbolic. And, you know, we did a lot of social media around that as well, so that people could see that, you know, it's just a small sort of symbolic move, but I think it really is indicative of the priorities of the U.S. government right now to focus on these issues. Yeah.
Fantastic. So Lisa, I just want to come back to you to talk about what kind of representations are still lacking in either television or films. I know that we have already talked about some of it, but if you can just focus, these are the representation we urgently need in American LGBTQ films or OTT shows. Yeah, that'll be brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big data girl. Like the truth is in the numbers. And if you're talking like mainstream cinema, kind of what's happening right now is that the visibility of LGBTQ characters is getting better over the years, but actually over the last 3 years, the BIPOC representation is getting less, like by a lot. And so the big majority of those LGBTQ characters are white, mostly white male. And the people that are really left out, obviously, are trans. There wasn't any trans representation in any of the mainstream cinemas last year. Non-binary is getting better because I think this is kind of like a new concept that people are starting to come out about, and it's getting a little bit better. But surprisingly, bisexual people. So bisexual stories make up most of the population in the LGBTQ umbrella, but it's like the least represented. And it's not just in like characters, but it's also the least represented in like the way that they show their narrative. So most of the time they will show a female that's bisexual, but it's always they're bisexual because it's like furthering her in the plot, not because it's her desire or like love for like, all genders or two genders, right? And male bisexuality is almost like completely like unseen and rejected. So I think, the places for opportunity is obviously more people of color, more bisexuality, and trans and non-binary are like the really big missing gaps.
What do you think, Onir, about the Indian situation? What do you think are the real current needs of representation which are missing? I know a lot of things are missing, but what do you think are urgently needed?
I feel, I think you have also noticed that what we have suddenly seen in the name of, okay, now let's have more, platforms also have this, you have to get your box ticked, is suddenly there's a lot of lesbian stories coming up, very problematic, mostly because it's it's almost like a heteronormative fantasy, male fantasy, which you're seeing the way it's told. And of course you have in India, actually you have also a lot of trans, but again, very stereotyped, it's the same kind of stories. Very often, either they're only prostitutes, violent, and, it's the same, like kind of scary, something mysterious, something which has little evil in it. There's very few stories that represent them in the way it should. So, and gay representation, I feel that, honestly speaking, after 2018, like whatever we have, either it goes into, when a mainstream actor wants to do it, I'm watching the film, I'm like, this is not me, because it's something where they just go so, trying so hard to be that, okay, let's say all the things right, let's do everything right, and we have to be funny so that everyone laughs. And I'm like, why do we have to be these jokers, kind of a thing? So I find actually so much space to tell. There are so many stories of our lives, which is totally missing, and even right now, whatever is told is again upper class, city centric. I'm partly guilty because I belong to that world and I find it easier. And so consciously, this time when I'm making a film, I'm doing one story in Kashmir where people speak Kashmiri. There's someone from Kerala who speaks in Malayali, someone from Bengal who speaks in Bengali. So various languages and various class. But having said that, I don't need to do. There are many others who are capable enough to tell these stories, but these stories are not being heard at all. Gay does not mean Bombay, Delhi, Calcutta. It also means the rest of this country, the small villages, and the stories there has its own beauty, all kinds. And also you're constantly told that, oh, why does the stories always have to be sad? And why this whole thing about the necessity to come out, the straight people don't have to come out, and but straight people don't have to be closeted. I have grown up not knowing the word gay till I was in class 12 because I had no reference point. And today it's for Sridhar, for me, and hopefully many more, to give these stories to young people who are struggling to deal with their, sexuality, to understand who they are, to be able to respect, not to have any reference point in literature, in the books you read at school, in biology, in history, in the films you watch. The first ever film I watched was My Beautiful Laundry when I was in college. I'm like, God, So I feel that we need to make these stories so that children, right from school, because there is this whole thing that, no, school children, we don't watch. So, you are born the way you are. And I don't care, even if you choose, you have the right to choose also to experiment with sexuality. There's this whole thing that, no, it's not a choice. What if it's a choice also? But this whole thing that keep it away from children, that means you are, those children who are aware of their sexuality or learning to, it is kept away. So immediately there is this sense of not being quote unquote normal or not being celebrated. So you're made to feel inferior. And I feel we really, really need these stories which talk to young people, to children, to say that you're beautiful. You don't have to be special. You're beautiful like everyone else. I'm not special. When, like you were saying, when you were called for this inclusion, talks everywhere, and there's this whole thing that, I really want to understand how you are. And, gay people are so wonderful, I'm like, no, we are the same. There are enough horrible gay people. And, there are all kinds of, and just because you're gay, you're not politically aware of everything. You're disasters at times. And why is it so difficult to understand another human being? No one taught me how to accept you. I mean, I just accept your life. No one had to have seminars that, with us saying that how to accept a straight man and a woman.
Right. Totally. I hear you, O'Neill, and I hear Lisa also. More representation of bisexual people, BIPOC characters per se. And also, O'Neill, I hear you about a representation of youth, films meant for youth per se. At Kashish, we receive almost 60 Indian LGBTQ films, believe me, every year. You think that there's no Indian films being made on LGBTQ issues, but there are 60 Indian LGBTQ films submitted every year, out of which we program on 40 of them. But these are short films, these are independent films, these are documentaries, which never get a release on any platform. If I try to take it to some of the mainstream platforms, they say, oh, this is not happening for us. So that's one of the things. But Lisa, I want to just ask you this one last question before we wind up. What do you think of actual trans characters, actors playing trans parts, lesbian actors playing lesbian parts? Do you think it's a must, or do you think it's necessary at all to adhere to this? I mean, it's a hot raging conversation everywhere. So I just want to ask you this question.
Yeah, I absolutely 100% think it's a must. I think until the playing field is more, equal or somewhat equal for opportunities for queer actors, then I feel like then you can kind of open it up and let people, play different types of stories and identities. But until we get there, and we have a long way to go, I think you really have to, cast authentically.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Onir is just doing the same thing with his next film VR, where he's casting. So just over to Onir to explain what is it. Do you face challenges casting real life transgender actors or any the different diversity which you have in your film?
Yeah, I feel I have this mixed thing. Like, for example, for the role of the trans woman in my next film, I am so happy and proud that I'm casting. I finally found someone, now also putting through a workshop, a real trans woman. I have 2 drag queens who are real drag queens, and I have, the thing is, I'm constantly, when I'm auditioning actors, because there are many queer roles in the film, I always send them an email. Like, I will not discriminate, but if you are from the LGBTQI family, it'll be +1 point, because I want to empower. At the same time, even if you're closet, that's okay, because we belong to if I force someone to come out in a situation that we are in, however much I want people to come out, then an actor who is gay, if he comes out, I don't even have to doubt, and I'm sure Sridhar will also agree, that it's extremely difficult for that person to be getting roles in other characters, and then he'll have to wait for years that when Sridhar will make a film or I'll make a film when they can fit it, So I feel that that space has to be left open so that, whichever way, and there at times, like, for example, my third story is a lesbian, and I just didn't find the lesbian actor that I would have wanted, because it also requires a certain skill. So I tried to do a combination, empower some people that I could, and where I couldn't, I said that, okay, as long as, because I feel it's also so important that straight, because it's not very normal for many straight actors to feel comfortable in doing intimate scenes. And when there is someone who is, happy doing it, exploring it, it's also important, because the ally part of the LGBTQI plus, they need to be made as much a part of it, because it also tells other people, if that film is celebrated, oh my God, you can play gay and be loved and be celebrated. And it just kind of also, in a different way empowers.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on
please.
to that really quick. Sorry.
Sure.
That I think, it's different in every country. And I hadn't even considered some of that. And I think that the most important thing is that a director or a creator exhaust their resources to find that authenticity, whatever those resources are. And then you just, you make decisions from there. But it's so hard to make a film anywhere. So the fact that you're even putting this in production and making it, I mean, that is such an accomplishment, and do what you can.
Yeah, in fact, like for me, also, like, when I make films, for me, making the film is part of the sensitization process. When I hire a transgender actor to play a transgender characters, well, when that person comes on the set, everybody looks at this person strangely. Why is she here? Somebody who's been supposed to be begging on the street. Why is she here on the sets? But when I give her the same respect which I give to the other actors, I can see the change. All the unit members start giving her respect, offering a chair, offering a tea. So those are the kind of sensitization process which we can basically bring across, not just on screen, but also off screen. So a quick word, winding up words per se. Alexander, what do you think? In terms of anything you would want portrayals of LGBTQ characters to change majorly in American cinema or worldwide cinema? You have been consuming worldwide cinema too, or have you been seeing Indian films too? I don't know.
Actually, yeah, I wanted to sort of circle back to something that Onir was talking about gay films in Indian cinema, basically. And from sort of a foreign perspective, as someone who came to live in India for the first time 10 years ago, and I've seen a lot of Hindi films over the last 10 years, and I have seen a little bit of a change. I feel like 10 years ago, the queer characters that I saw in Bollywood films were often, caricatures, very effeminate, like wedding planners, just sort of total stereotypes. And, just this last year, I think it was last year that, now we're seeing films like, what is it? Shubh Mangal, Zyada Savdhan. I mean, it's still problematic. There's a lot we could unpack there, but I still feel like it's baby steps. It's an improvement, it's got the main characters are gay. So you've got main characters who are queer, and it's somewhat normalized. I mean, it is, as Anir was saying, there's a lot of, making fun and a lot of jokes and all of that, but still, I feel like this is progress compared to where India was 10 years ago when I first moved to India and started watching Bollywood films. So, I mean, I'd love to get Onir's reaction on that. I don't know if I'm way off base, but that's sort of what I see as an outsider looking in.
No, I feel that because most people, like what Sridhar and we've been talking, because they don't see the films which are made by queer people, who are out and proud. So they see the worst of Bollywood, and then this is something to celebrate, But like for us, we have done this 10 years ago. What Sridhar has done or I have done has been much more empowering. Okay, which these actors would have refused to do. Which is they're safe. For me, when I look at them, I don't even see any romance there. They're more like two friends, who hug, and that Indian men are always anyway physical, So for me, it is something that just keeps the heteronormative world, happy and accepting. And it is, of course, in a way important that, okay, more people accepting, but I'm like, I want to tell my stories. Why am I always having to think of what will please? And, they have to learn to also listen to our stories. And unless we have these stories, they don't need to have as many viewers as that. It will grow slowly. But if we are not given that space, that will never, it will just, I don't know, happen when. I mean, we are in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, when I first saw this film, though, I definitely, it made me think like this is India's Will and Grace or something. I mean, there's so much that's problematic about it. It's making fun. It's, it's even in Will and Grace that, at least at the beginning, the characters just felt all like friends. Didn't see a lot of like romance or anything, but somehow it feels like a sort of, maybe it's a watershed moment for India. I'm not sure, but until I think more of the authentic stories, as you say, come into the mainstream, and films that are made by queer filmmakers, because you can tell when you watch this film, Shubh Mangal Zyada Savdhan, that it's not made by a queer filmmaker. So I think, yeah, once those, maybe it opens the door though for more films by queer filmmakers that have more authentic stories. I don't know. Yeah.
So last word from Lisa. What is your next project? Is it a big ticket gay film or a lesbian film or a transgender film?
Well, I am on my second feature. I just finished writing it, and now we're just waiting to find out the shoot dates. But it's based on a young adult novel called Gracefully Grayson, and it's about a young child who's questioning their gender identity in as a sixth grader. So it's a young adult type film. It's very sweet and compassionate and artsy, and yeah, we're hoping it does really good things.
Fantastic. All right, so I think we'll give you a big cheer and hug for the best wishes for your film, and also Onir for your film VR for sure. And thank you, Alexander, for joining in this wonderful conversation. Thank you all for being part of the One World International Queer Film Festival panel. And we hope that more people are going to be making more LGBTQ focused films in US and India. And I hope we all paint the entire screen rainbow totally. So thank you for this opportunity for moderating and talking to you all. And if you have not watched the films yet, the films of Lisa Donato and so many other wonderful filmmakers are still online at One World International Queer Film Festival. So please log in and watch these films. It'll disappear during midnight. This midnight is the last time you're going to watch it. So please go and watch it. Thank you, Lisa, for sharing your film. Thank you, Alexander, for coming for the panel. Thank you, Anil, for being part of the panel.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you, y'all. Yeah, thanks.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
Totally.